harbor a terrorist view, ISIS or Al-Qaeda or those who purport to be representing Islam, deals with the concept of jihad and the notion of what that means. That word, and we often use here the word jihadis to define these terrorists, is a beautiful word in Islam. It has deep spiritual connotations. It refers to an intense personal struggle of self-reform and self-reflection. All Muslims engage in a jihad of the self to vanquish the evil inclinations and to cleanse themselves and to live a pure life. Unfortunately, that word has been perverted in such a way that it's encapsulated as an aggressive ideology. That is, you can engage in jihad through an aggressive means, not in a manner that's spiritual per se, but in an aggressive means as an extension of that spirituality. So that if you believe that your mission is to spread Islam, and your jihad can't be complete, and now I'm parroting what members of ISIS might say, your jihad cannot be complete unless you engage in a physical, aggressive war against those who are the infidel, those who aren't Muslims. The vast majority of Muslims do not believe that. They believe that that is such a perversion of such an important concept in Islam, that idea that you can wage an aggressive war has no place in the Quran or the traditions and the examples of the founder of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad. And it's a longer conversation, but I can say this. There are verses in the Quran that very clearly speak to this. Of course, there is no compulsion in faith, a very clear commandment, a commandment that is unambiguous in its scope. But there's another verse in the Quran that says that God has created people to have religious differences. And if everyone on the earth believed the same faith, then those differences would be lost. And then it's very clear in the Quran, will you then force others to believe? It's a question that is in a verse in chapter 10 of the Quran. Will you then force others to believe? The notion that you can wage an aggressive jihad through a physical means is just absolutely antithetical to what the core verses of the Quran stand for. And this is the struggle for the soul of Islam. The battle of ideas begins with the concept of jihad.
And where does the concept of the infidel, the non-believer, or the non-correct believer, where does that come from?
The notion of kufr, or disbelievers, or non-believers, is mentioned in the Quran. The notion of those who aren't Muslim. It's actually referred to as non-Muslim. But in the interpretations of the Quran and in the interpretations of the history of the wars fought in self-defense, there is a notion that those who aren't Muslim must become Muslim, and they must become Muslim through an aggressive means. It comes from geopolitical struggles that are projected by cherry-picking verses of the Quran to suit their ends. And unfortunately, that idea is attractive in an environment that's very tense. When you have the Palestinian conflict, when you have what's happening in Syria and Iraq and the Middle East crisis, the struggles, the geopolitical struggles and disaffection and frustration of young Muslim millennials, that creates a powder-keg situation when those who galvanize that idea, they prey on that vulnerable, impressionable youth population to say, this is the jihad we need now because we are being cornered and Islam is being attacked. It's a manipulation.
And why do you think that they're political, that there is such a ready audience for it? Or these things are cyclical, and this is the thing now? What do you think?
I think it comes from a lack of leadership. I believe that leadership matters, and because Islam is diffuse, because there are 73 different kinds of Muslims, because there are the majority of Muslims in this country, there are Arabs who are Christian who aren't Muslim, but the majority of Muslims aren't Arab. And there's such a huge tent within Islam. There's a struggle to capture who is going to speak for Islam. And our community believes that the cure for that is a resurgence of leadership. We believe in a Khalifa, a spiritual, you can say a Muslim pope figure, to unite Muslims along a very clear path to battle this idea. Our community's DNA speaks to the notion of a bloodless intellectual jihad by the pen, to defend Islam from attack, not through any aggressive means. If leadership is lacking among the larger, broader Islamic ummah, then there is a crisis in that leadership, and people will emerge who will claim to have the mantle of leadership and therefore recruit others.
Is that really realistic, given these differences, though, to have a pope-like figure? I wonder, what about the alternative instead of all these different communities where there are theological or cultural, subcultural differences, having that as a more open debate, and raising the profile of the theology of Islam. And it's something we're used to Christians fighting about stuff. We're used to Jews disagreeing about. That's sort of part of, can we have that within Islam?
I think so, and I think it's due. I think there needs to be a global discussion about this struggle intellectually, and this notion in Islam of ijma, or consensus. There needs to be a consensus built around common principles that divorce these ideas that you can use jihad for this physical means. And unless there is a discussion at a high level intellectually among prominent communities, we will not have the ability for certain communities to surface. But I do believe the prescription has to come from grand leadership. I mean, Pope Francis is a transformative figure. And when he came to the United States, or when he addressed the Muslim world, he's a transformative figure because people believe in his message, and they believe in the power of rallying around something that isolates extreme perversion. That leadership matters. We believe there is a time for that leadership, and we're united by a leader to do that. We have to have a conversation.